Hey team, how are we doing? Happy Monday. I hope you're feeling absolutely sensational today. So, hopefully, you will have listened to last week's episode when we had the lovely Leah in to talk about her kind of beginning phase of the journey of her life. We're now going to talk about the next level, where she's going on a personal and professional manner, and also a bit of history into what she's done in the psychology realms. Leah, how are you doing today?
I'm really good, thank you. It's good to be back.
It is ace to have you back. So we're going to get stuck straight in. I want to know a little bit more because obviously last time we talked about why you chose psychology, how you got into it. But now I want to talk about the journey, like post uni, where you've been working, what you've loved, what you haven't enjoyed, and just get a bit of a broader picture of that.
That sounds good. So I qualified from my doctorate studies back in 2015. So when I first finished, I got a job in an adolescent mental health unit, which was secure mental health unit. So very challenging. So this wasn't in the NHS, it was a private adolescent setting, working with young people that had really complex mental health, very high risk. It was a difficult position. And in this private hospital, I went in and I ended up actually being the only psychologist there, which wasn't what I was expecting as a newly qualified. So there was someone more experienced there initially. They left not long after I started. I ended up being the only person there. So it was a really, really stressful first job after qualifying. And when I say qualifying, it took me 10 years to get to that position. So from starting my psychology degree after my childcare kind of education and working in a nursery, did my undergraduate degree, which was 3 years. Then I had to get some experience to be able to get onto the doctorate. So I worked as an assistant psychologist for 3 years. And that was and again in a private type setting, worked a lot with people with eating disorders as an assistant psychologist. Then got onto so I did that for 3-4 years, then got onto the doctorate, which then was 3 years. So it was ended up being 10 years in total from starting my psychology career to becoming qualified. So just wanted to let people know that because it's a long journey. So when I say newly qualified, it's a 10-year journey to get to that point. So yeah, so that was my first job post kind of being qualified psychologist, and it was really, really stressful. I not long after starting work there was looking for other positions, but not because I didn't like the work. I just didn't feel supported in that environment, being the only psychologist, which took me to my next position, which I got in a clinical health psychology team over in Stoke-on-Trent. So this is where I ended up working. I had a split post. So I was working into what was called a bariatric psychology service. So with predominantly women, but not with some men as well, that had a lot of weight issues, had weight issues throughout their life and had come through the kind of pathway to go to bariatric surgery. And as part of that process, they had to come to me for an assessment to look at their mental health, to think about how they got to this stage in their lives of being so overweight, and to think about the psychological implications of going through surgery and whether that was the right option for them. Really interesting work. So I did a split post between working into that service and also working into a cancer psychology service. So with people that had a diagnosis of cancer, they could be anywhere on that journey, from being recently diagnosed, going through treatment, or even at the stage where maybe treatment wasn't any longer successful. So more that kind of palliative care end. I absolutely loved my work in the cancer service, working with a whole range of different people, from being given that diagnosis and how overwhelming that can be, but also supporting people on that journey through treatment and how to. I think there was two main groups I would say that I ended up working with. It was the people that were going through treatment and ended up kind of almost survivorship work, and how that feels to have had something that can be life-threatening, And then how do you move on and get on with your life beyond treatment after that point? And then there was another group of people that were more kind of cancer, it's kind of, this treatment hadn't worked. They were going to move into a phase where it might not be immediate, but they knew that cancer was going to take their life at some stage, and how to get their head around that, how to live with cancer in that knowledge that actually at some point this is going to end their lives. That was another whole bit of work which I felt very privileged to be doing, that I think, being able to be with people on the end of life journey, it felt a real privilege. And there's a lot of people that have stayed in my mind who I know are no longer here, that I've taken a lot from as a psychologist, and it's helped me through other bits of my work. And also a really stark reminder of what's important in life. I think that bit of my career really gave me that and opened up my own kind of, in my personal life, what is really important and really valuing things. So I was working in the cancer service for quite some time. I ended up swapping my bariatric role eventually to working into the spinal cord injury centre over in Oswestry. So I was working part-time cancer psychology and then part-time into the spinal injury unit, and I was doing that for a few years before I finally moved over to full-time into the spinal injury centre, which is where I am currently still working. So that's working with people that have had a life-changing injury. So a lot of people that, there's a lot of reasons why people come to our centre, lots of different ways people get their injuries, but it's with people that are paraplegic, tetraplegic, that have had, traumatic things happen to them and very life-changing, supporting them and their families through that journey. So that's a job I'm still in, and I've been doing that for the last 5 years, which again is very rewarding job. And I think when I started there, it's opened my eyes. I hadn't realised all the different kinds of ways people can end up with a spinal cord injury. So I support people right from childhood right up to old age that have had these injuries for many, many reasons. So it's really interesting work.
It sounds, and what an array of different people, different circumstances that you've kind of helped to assist through, but all almost in their own ways, very humbling, very, make you realize that life is so precious. And the word that I put right the way down from the fact it took you 10 years to train, to qualify, and then, the bariatrics and them having to go, like when they go for an operation, and then also cancer, whichever way it's kind of going to go, and then the life-changing injury. The one word that came up for me in each of those scenarios, even in your own, is identity. And it's like, if you look at you when you began your training compared to when you qualified, not only will you have learned this absolute wealth of knowledge, you'll have had, rolled your sleeves up and got dirty, you'll have all this experience, but also like looking at you as a human, how much your identity would have needed and would have naturally have evolved. Sorry, do you want to say something on that?
Yeah, no, I was just gonna, that kind of really stands out, that I think I've evolved, I would say, more so since qualifying, into realizing that we as humans can face all sorts of problems, and that there isn't one single group of people. This can affect anyone in any walk of life. Doesn't matter how much money you've got, there's lots of things that can happen in life that can affect us and impact on our mental health. And it's really made me aware of that. Me included, I think it can affect anyone.
Definitely. And I think there's many reasons, we can, like you mentioned, the money side of things. It doesn't matter how much money you've got. Look at Steve Jobs. He ended up dying of pancreatic cancer with all that money, all the kind of intel with, these companies, which, if someone could have done something, he would probably be the man who would know them. And it's just mad, isn't it? And then, because obviously, my background being personal training, I've always looked at bariatric surgery and things like that, you know, the injections on the NHS to help you to lose weight. And I've always been like, I'm so against them.
Yeah.
And I understand there is a place for them, and you might correct me on this, and I'm perfectly ready to be humbled. But it's like, the way I see it is physical changes with the right support, accountability, and plan can happen for some people. Some of the time, like you said about the psychological barriers of not only going through the surgery, but the reason why they got there in the first place are definitely a huge consideration. And I would say a lot of the reason we are where we're at physically is because of the driver of the thought process and the inability to process things potentially.
Yeah.
But so when you then just go and have a gastric bypass, gastric band, tummy tuck, none of that impacts your brain.
No. And that was one of my main reasons why I wanted to leave that service, actually, that there's a huge gap, I feel, in offering psychological provision for people to give them the coping strategies. So the surgery, it's actually taken away the only way people know how to cope with mental distress. Often a lot of people have got to that stage through comfort eating, they may have developed there might be a load of reasons underneath that why they started comfort eating and overeating over time, but actually through surgery, you're taking away being able to, you can only eat very small portions initially, so you're actually taking away someone's only way of coping. And my issue with that service was that people were offered assessment to identify need, but there wasn't a lot of service to give intervention and support to build people's coping strategies, to help them understand why they comfort ate and overate in the first place and find alternative ways of managing that. And I actually strongly believe people should be offered that before they go down the surgery route anyway, because actually if people can reach a stage of understanding, why do I comfort eat, why am I overeating, and find a way to manage that, they may not ever need the surgery. And there was so many people that would come through the service that were coming back for revisional surgeries because they'd had one surgery, not offered intervention, because that's not provided. Well, it certainly wasn't in the area I was working in. And over time, we're able to eat more and more again. So weight piled back on again. So we're back in for more surgery. So it feels like a quick fix rather than actually helping to find not only a solution, but helping people to feel empowered and in control of their eating and be able to actually enjoy eating. Because a lot of the people I saw, food was a battle. They may enjoy food in the moment, but actually there was a lot of difficult feelings wrapped up with food, a lot of shame attached to overeating. Yeah.
Love that. And it's so true. And because I've always looked at it from the standpoint of, it doesn't shift their identity, it doesn't solve the why behind why they got to where they got to, but it is just like a very risky, for some people who go private, a very expensive short-term solution. And it removes the power out of their hand. And that's something that we try our absolute best to do inside the coaching club, is to put the power back in their hands, to go, look, if we can get to the understanding of why you are the shape and size that you are, you know, what is it that's underlying, what's causing the behavior, then we can start to understand it more, start to work our way through the shame, work our way through the guilt. And obviously with the help of people like yourself, it is the most rewarding journey, because you see the identity change along with it. And then what would you say, so when people go through the life-changing injuries, is it the identity shifts of, I can't do the things that I used to do? Is it like the grieving the old self? Like, what would you say is the main thing? That might be really hard to answer, but that people struggle with, because I could not even, you know, I couldn't even imagine it.
Yeah, I think for life-changing injury and illness, I think both of them, I think I saw this in the cancer work I did as well. It's a loss initially, a huge loss of life as they knew it, that it's usually often quite traumatic. It's a sudden change or a sudden diagnosis that turns someone's world completely upside down. So life as they knew it is not the same. And that can be really unstabilizing, that people, struggle to function. So I think the very first part of that is grieving that loss of life as they knew it. And then that takes time to kind of work through a process of making sense of what's happened to them. And this process can take a long time. For some people, that grieving the life as they knew it, kind of starting to come through the process of making sense of what's happened, what position they're in now, and then what is this future going to look like. It may be that life has to be very different for them, but it doesn't mean they're still the same person. But it's how can we think about their values as a person? How can we think about those things that are important to them? How can they still engage in life in a meaningful way, but in a different way?
That's so powerful. And even you mentioning there, like, to link their values into who they are now as a person.
Yeah.
I think that is it must be very hard when you're in that moment. And again, I couldn't even comprehend how hard it would be, but to be like, okay, I am still a being. Yes, okay, there are many changes that will happen and have happened, but I am still me. And this is something that I'm doing a lot of research on at the minute, and listening to podcasts and stuff like that. And it's who we are physically is not who we are.
Yeah.
But
and that's and a lot of people, I would say, that have come through the cancer service, or have come through the service they're currently working, they may not have ever had any psychological work before. They may not have even considered things like values, what's important to me. They may not have done any kind of self-development work like that. So it's a completely different language. And I think the other thing in the service that I work in at the moment, so I'm part of the team there, and a lot of people have never met a psychologist before, and there's a lot of stigma attached to seeing a psychologist or having support from a psychologist, that's for a certain kind of person. So a lot of the initial work that we end up doing is talking about how our role is important and getting to know people. And it's not that we're labeling them in a certain way, but they've been through something really traumatic. And actually having a space to start to talk about that, often away from family and friends, is important, because I think what we often find, whether that's with illness or injury, the need to protect, people want to protect the people around them, to kind of almost keep all their feelings bottled up because they don't want to upset anyone else. So some people need that space to start to talk, to process what's going on for them, to enable them to move forward. So going back to those things, thinking about values and who people are, it's a different language for people. People are not used to talking about those things or even thinking about those things.
It is so true. And I think that's the danger of going on this journey. It's not the danger, I suppose, but it's the time that you have to be like, whoa, like, put your brakes on here. Remember that some people won't have a bloody clue, and that's okay. But imagine the kind of changes of life that can happen when we do introduce those things. And I was listening to, I can't remember if it was Johnny Wilkinson's podcast or someone else, and they were saying, oh no, it was Stephen Bartlett, with a relationship expert. And he was saying about how in USA, therapy is amazing. Like, everyone goes for therapy. Everyone either has a psychologist or a psychotherapist, or, whatever. But here, it's almost can be seen as it's weak. It's for people who are fucking nuts.
There's a lot of stigma attached.
Why is that?
I'm not sure. I think there is starting to be a shift. I've noticed, I would say, even in this last 12 months, there seems more of a shift in kind of social media presence of mental health professionals, or, coaches, people like yourself, and starting to think about self-development. I think there is a change, but it's very ingrained, and particularly with people that, and middle to older age, even more so, it's ingrained that that you have to kind of stiff up a lip. You don't talk about your feelings. It's not commonly done. And you probably find it when people come into the coaching club, that people are not used to talking about who they are and their values, what's important. People, I imagine, sometimes come in knowing they want something different, but not with a clear vision of what they are, what they want, and who they want to become.
I just think we talked about this last night actually on a training session, and a lot of the time, like, we don't get taught these things at school. You don't get taught, okay, if you feel anxious, what do you feel like you need to do? Okay, you're stressed, what do you feel like you need to do? Okay, you're angry, can you look at the trigger? Can you look at, like, we don't get taught that. We also don't get...
Even going a step back from that, I don't think we're even taught what are these emotions.
So true.
So, you know, what is the difference between anxiety and anger? In people, it's not openly talked about, is it? That what does being anxious feel like? And sometimes the start of some of my work I do with people is going through emotions and thinking about what does that feel like for you, you know, so they can start to be aware and distinguish between what is this feeling inside me.
Yeah, because it could be like how you could explain anxiety, like when you're anxious compared to me, could be two completely different feelings. And I remember actually having a chat with a friend about this, and she was like, no, that's not anxiety. And I was like, well, that's what I would call it. So yeah, instead of you saying your kind of the way that you explain it, how about we both just have our own definitions, and that's okay.
Yeah.
You could, I think there's a lot of kind of like something to do with labeling, and it's like, oh, it's got to be this. No, it doesn't. You know, if that's the word, the way that you want to phrase it, that's okay. But I think that's so true. And the ability to put your hand up and ask for help, serving yourself a little bit, not necessarily first. Like, a lot of people are like, the kids always come first, then it's the career, then it's then it's me. And it's like, okay, so if you can't come first, can you come just like one priority higher up the ladder?
Yeah, that's self-care. It's so important.
Absolutely. So that sounds amazing. And now I want to go into the kind of development of where you're at. Like, obviously you're still in the life-changing injury department now, but what else is going on for you professionally? What's kind of like on the horizon for you?
So I've fairly recently also started my private practice. So alongside my NHS job, I've also launched a private practice. So offering one-to-one therapy for adults. So working with a range of difficulties, but helping people that are ready for that change, but are feeling that sense of stuck and they don't know how to move on.
Love that. And what made that come about in regards to why have you pulled away? Like, why are you doing that from a business aspect, but then also from a, like, why that particular type of person do you want to help?
I want to be able to help more people. That's something definitely that I wanted to do, which is why I've started the private work and been able to, I suppose, offer my support out to more people and open that net. That I think obviously I'm working in a very specialist unit in my NHS work. So it's kind of opening that up to offer a different kind of work. What was the second question that you asked? Sorry.
I should ask them individually. Sorry. The second question was like, so that person that you said that you help, why those? Like, what's been your kind of reason for going to that person to help?
I really feel that I can help people that have reached that point of one, and it sounds kind of, I don't know if it does sound odd, but saying that they're ready for change. That I think sometimes people want a quick fix and almost come in for some work and expect some miraculous change without actually doing any hard work. And I think therapy can sometimes be difficult. So when I say readiness for change, that people being prepared to, I suppose, delve in and look at things on a deeper level and are ready for that work to propel themselves forward. I think therapy can be difficult, and sometimes people worry about that kind of taking the lid off something and not being able to put it back on. So I think, you know, one of the important bits of my job is to provide that kind of space for people to do that deep delve into, to making sense of who they are. What are those things that are creating those blocks and barriers that from them moving forward and creating the life they want to lead, and equipping them with, so they feel empowered to. So life is difficult. We never know what's going to be thrown at us. You know, as the work I've described, injury, illness, people dying, people losing jobs, the current climate. There's so many different difficult things that go on for us as humans. And I think being able to I suppose what I'm passionate about is being able to give people those skills to manage what life throws at them.
Love that. And 2 questions that came up, I'll give you them one by one. So if you've got someone who's listening to this right now and they're like, yes, yep, that's it, I want to now, make that change, but now she said that, how will I know I'm actually ready?
Good question. Good question.
Shall I elaborate?
Yeah.
Because I think sometimes people can think they're ready. I think they can be like, yes, I'm ready. You've got 2 ends of the scale. And I suppose this is like actually 2 questions in one. You've got the person who, so I know, for example, people watch the coaching club, they watch my social media, they listen to my podcast, they come along to all the events I do that they're allowed to come to, and they could join because they're like, I'm ready. But then sometimes like life events can happen, or maybe there's just like something going on identity wise, or they don't feel they're worthy, some stuff very subconscious.
Yeah.
And they can have thought that they were ready, they can have thought that they were ready for months, and then they cannot do the work, they cannot do the action. But then you've got the other end of the scale of people who are like, oh no, I'm not ready, no, I'm not ready, I'm not ready, I'm just not ready, like years and years and years and years. And it's like, how do we help those people to realize, 1, are they ready? And 2, how will you know?
I think it's people need to reach a point of being aware of what's impacting on them. So I think having that awareness of, I suppose, the pain points, the things that are difficult for them, and what do they want to get to. I think you kind of almost need to get to wanting that change is really important.
I think as well, like, so if I think back to 4 years ago when I first hired, it's probably even longer than that now, I first hired my first mentor, I was so fucking ready. I was so ready. I was so eager. And I actually, the reason why it wasn't the most successful journey wasn't because of my lack of try and effort. But if I didn't sign up with that first mentor, a recommended person that was from someone I know,
Yeah.
I wouldn't be working with the guy I'm working with now. And I think yes, they need to have that willingness. They're like, I know it's going to be hard. I know I'm going to have to do this. I know I'm maybe opening that can of worms at times, but I trust this person who's going to get me through it, or at least move me forwards. Because even if you're not quite reaching the outcomes that you want with that particular person, you're still moving forwards.
Yeah, definitely.
So I think it's allowing, like, it's not a finite, do you win or lose? Not like, none of this self-development journey is. It's going, what can I like? So I now know from this lady Michelle that I worked with first, I learned so much from it. And a lot of it is, I wouldn't fucking listen to that again, I wouldn't do that again, that was a load of shit. But it's the same as like going through relationships in life. You learn what you do and don't like.
It's still that development though, isn't it? It's still that step forwards.
So it's like, the reason why I asked that question is because I know there'll be some women listening to this going, okay, well, I've been, watching this girl for some time. How will I know I'm ready?
Yeah.
And when am I just stopping myself? And I suppose
some of it's about putting your trust as well, isn't it? And just making that step to try something different.
And the question that comes to my head is, what's the alternative?
Yeah.
And
that zooms me back to the last podcast, which when I've been in that position of being at that crossroads of, I could choose this and do nothing. When I was in hospital, I could choose the path of giving up, or I can choose the path of, actually, I don't want that, I want a different future. So it is making that choice.
I agree. And I think you see the people, like, I went to an event in London in August, and there was some absolutely insane speakers up, talking, very local guys, people that you would walk past in the street and just like, oh, he's a nice guy. And every single one of the speakers who came up said, literally, for every inverted commas success they've had, they probably had 10 failures. But I think we're of this idea that, when you commit to a journey, that's it, you've got to win, it's got to be successful. If not, you're the failure. But sometimes it can be wrong time. Sometimes it can be the wrong kind of energy and person for you. Sometimes you can think you're ready, like I said before, but actually when it comes to some of the sacrifices, some of the discomfort, some of the changes that you have to go through, you're like, fuck that, I am not ready.
Yeah. And that's okay, isn't it? That's okay.
Definitely. But again, it's about, like, one thing that the word that always stands out when I think about you is compassion. You're such a compassionate human. You're so understanding. And I think you ooze that into the people around you. You ooze it into people around you to learn to be kinder to yourself. And I think when embarking on a journey like this, if it doesn't quite go to the plan, if it doesn't, maybe it feels harder at times, it's how can you learn to express that self-compassion?
Yeah, absolutely. That's key.
And so what do you believe people like, so if we talk now about where the person is before they come and work with you, let's explain that to begin. So if someone, like, how do you explain that person? Like, what are they feeling? What are they thinking?
It can be lots of different things, but a lot of clients I work with can be stuck in that, I suppose, not having strong self-esteem or self-worth, that there's lots of critical thoughts in there that hold them back, lots of anxiety. I think anxiety is, probably I've seen in most of my clients that, but it's the self-criticalness, I think, that sometimes holds people back. Those self-beliefs.
And then working with you, what is the type of person that you hope, or I suppose you can't really hope, but where do they want to get to generally? Talking more about the people that you work with on the, like, outside of the NHS.
Get into a position where, I think, going back to that word compassion is really important, so people can develop that compassion for themselves. I think to really understand their emotions and their internal world. I think that's really key for any change, to make sense of their internal world, what is going on for me, and to be able to bring compassion to that. So when I talk about compassion, I see that as not just being kind, but also having that wise mind of being able to see what's going on for me. And that kind of kindness and compassion is one element to it, but the wiseness of what is going on and what do I need, being able to see that and know what action to take, that is really important to be able to face any kind of difficult situation. Without that, we can get caught in feeling overwhelmed, panic, and I think people tend to find ways of just coping with distress because they don't know how to make sense of how they're feeling. So that can lead people to what we've already talked about: comfort eating, drinking too much alcohol, overworking as a way to distract themselves, and not really living a life that they want to lead.
And that is so powerful, because not living a life that you want to lead, I think a lot of people don't consider until potentially life's getting, like, running away with them, or even for worst case scenario, it's like in your rocking chair and you're thinking, shit, why didn't I just do that thing? Why didn't I, let go of the, like we mentioned, money earlier? Why did I worry about that so much? And that's it must be such a rewarding, like, career for you.
Definitely. I love it. I'm
Amazing.
curious about people though, so I think that's where that comes from. I think I'm curious about people, why they do the things they do, and helping people to make sense of themselves. Because I know how powerful that's been for myself to, I think, in my 30s, really understand myself and who I am, what's important to me. I know that difference in me now compared to when I was in my teens, my 20s, is so, so powerful. And that's been a journey of change. And I really feel that I can help people on their own similar journey to make sense of who they are and feel empowered.
Wow, that's insane. Thank you again so much for your time. I've absolutely loved it. And if people do want to check out Leah, her Instagram is Dr. Leah Wood _psychologist. So please go out there, give her a follow. Leah, thank you. Honestly, it's been such an incredible couple of hours listening to you talk, hearing you tell us about your journey, and also explaining things so well. I think there will probably be a follow-up in a few months' time to understand how your journey is going, if you'd be up for that.
Yeah, definitely. I'd love to.
Excellent. Thank you so much, team. Take it easy. See you later.